us this
John,
morning.
John Meacham, I've always been, like everybody, haunted by this speech and the words that rang out. I remember the first time hearing it was at First Baptist Church in I think it was Doraville, Georgia. They played it for us. But I've always been haunted. Been haunted by him talking about Chamblee, Georgia, haunted by the mountaintop, and the imagery that he gave Moses, not getting to the promised land, but seeing the promised land, and knowing that his people were going to get to the promised land. What was so remarkable about him talking about how longevity had a place, and he would hope for longevity, and saying it the night before he was assassinated. As you said, he almost didn't give this speech. It was raining outside. It was miserable.
Yeah.
Talk about the lead up to one of the what you consider, and I think what most of us consider, one of the great speeches in American history.
It really is. It was, as you say, it was storming in Memphis, and he wasn't all that excited about going to the Church of God headquarters there to deliver this speech, deliver this sermon. Ralph Abernathy talked him into it. He said, "They're here for you." Dr. King went, and we have these indelible words. And the words are indelible because of what happened the next day. But they're also, it's important, I think, when you look at the whole speech, it's a speech about economic justice. It's a speech about why he's in Memphis. He's in Memphis to support striking sanitation workers. He is trying to take the dream to the next step. He's trying to get from opening access to making sure there's a path to prosperity for everyone. And the Moses imagery, as you note, is so amazing. Part of the Song of Moses in Deuteronomy is Moses says, "Remember the days of old, remember the years of many generations. Ask thy fathers, and they will tell thee, thy elders, and they will show thee." And that's what the King Canon is. It's remembrance, not simply as a passive act, right? Today's not about, Dr. King's not about contemplating a statue and then going back to what we're doing anyway. It's remembrance in a biblical sense. It is an action to remind us why we do what we do and what it should be.
And Reverend Al Sharpton, you remember, and yet you move forward and push forward the legacy. You're doing it today, later on this morning, with the President of the United States and civil rights leaders. I'm curious your thoughts as we play the mountaintop speech from Memphis, where we were, where we are, and where we still need to go on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
I was 13 years old when Dr. King made that speech. I had just become youth director of his New York chapter, and because I grew up in New York, I was appointed youth director by Reverend William Jones and Reverend Jesse Jackson, and Jesse was there that night. And I remember when the next day, when we heard Dr. King was killed over the news, my mother, who was born and raised in Dothan, Alabama, started crying like it was a member of our family. And though I had seen Dr. King twice and had become part of the organization, I didn't understand why she was taking it like it was a cousin or uncle. And she said you would have had to grow up where you had to sit in the back of the bus like I did, or not drink at a water fountain, understand what Dr. King did. And I began understanding that what he saw from that mountaintop was an America that many of us didn't see as bad as our parents, but still saw from our parts being unequal. And he was saying he left the message for us to keep going until we got to the promised land. You must remember, Joe, in those days, the battle was there was some in the black community that were saying Dr. King had outrun his relevance, and the black power advocates were denouncing him. And he remained steady that I believe we can make it in America, we can do it nonviolently, we can change laws, and you have to stay the course. And as I've told you many times, his wife has had to kind of keep me on that path. Martin III, who will be with us today, co-chairing, and his wife has always reminded me, Mrs. King kind of kept us that were younger, next generation, that Martin not only believed in America, but he believed in the way we should change America. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, and that's what people ought to deal with on Martin Luther King Day. It's not a day to take off. It's a day to take on and turn America on to finishing the road for equal opportunity and equal protection under the law.
You know, John Meacham, I remember quite a few years ago, Tavis Smiley came on with his book, Death of a King. And I must say, I was shocked. Tavis laid it all out, a story that historians know, but that many of us forget. Yeah. How unpopular King was in his final years with many on the radical left and many inside the civil rights movement who didn't believe in moving forward peacefully, who believed there needed to be violence, there needed to be agitation. He was taking it from all sides, being critical of the Vietnam War, taking it from the right, not being violent and strident enough, taking it from the far left. And yet, he kept his head down, moved forward, kept talking about nonviolence resistance. History, of course, proved him to be right, proved him to be the indispensable man in the civil rights movement, the great figure that did more to move this country forward than, my God, anyone in American history when it came to civil rights.
Right. And you know, the danger is when you become a holiday, you become a homily. You become, at least in the popular mind, a simpler story than you really were. And Martin Luther King Jr. was this, Taylor Branch once referred to him as a second founding father. That what he did on Wednesday, August 28th, 1963, in the March on Washington, was he redefined for us American scripture that if you look around the Monumental Mall, Jefferson had started, Lincoln had improved on, and King argued for its full application. By the way, is there anything more American in monumental terms than Martin Luther King? That image right there stares in perpetuity across at Thomas Jefferson across the tidal basin, and Jefferson stares back. And that's in many ways the tension and the promise of the country.
That is, it's interesting when you say that, John. It's also interesting, and it's perfect, and that King, quite aware of Jefferson's many failings and quite aware that Jefferson was a slaveholder, King would use, just like abolitionists would use, Jefferson's words. Constantly, King, throughout his lifetime, would use Thomas Jefferson's words as both a sword and a shield to move the civil rights movement forward. Yeah. It's just remarkable.
Yeah. No, that's well put. Yes, I mean, that's the central claim of the movement was grounded in both sacred scripture and secular scripture. It was love thy neighbor as thyself, and it was that we should be the good Samaritan. You help, not least because it's the right thing to do, but because you might need help. And it was Jefferson's words from the summer of 1776. What King was saying to white America was, we didn't make this promise, you did. Live up to your promise. That was the claim. And it felt, to go to your question, it felt a little soft to people. The Reverend knows this far better than I do, but by the mid 1960s, 65, 66, you have this sense that Dr. King, John Lewis, they're the Sunday school version of the movement, right? It was sweet. It was, it did what it could, but nobody wanted to get hit in the head anymore. And in fact, John Lewis loses the chairmanship of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to Stokely Carmichael in 1966, because John Lewis, who bore the scars of the movement, was seen as too accommodationist. And the complexity of King, it seems to me, is that he remained devoted to nonviolence, not only as a tactic, but as a way of life. But let's be very clear. The claims in 1968 was not simply about, hey, let's all get along. It was about economic justice. It was about creating genuine reform. And genuine reform is not easy. It requires sacrifice. It requires a sense that we are, in fact, all in this together. And if you read that speech from April 3rd, you will see him calling out companies that he thinks should be boycotted. You see him talking about hard things, which is what prophets do.
Yeah. Rev?
I think Meacham hit it correctly. The tension, and again, I was just entering my team, and I'm in the North. The tension in the movement was it was not popular in New York to be with Dr. King's movement, because those that were more strident and more for violence or self-defense were saying that has run its course. And Dr. King's position was a real prophet stands up even to his own. You're not tested until you can be ridiculed by your own and stand up anyhow. Right. If you talk about Moses at the banks of the Red Sea, it was the children of Israel that turned on him and said, did you bring us out here to die? And that's when the miracle of the Red Sea opening happening. If you can't go beyond, and this is what Mrs. King tried to teach me, and Martin III keeps me on course, is that if you can't take the heckles of the crowd, we're going through it now with some that call themselves woke. If you can't take that, you will never be what you should be in terms of trying to move the country forward. It's easy to fight your adversary. It is more difficult to withstand the attacks of those that are your allies and stay the course anyway. And Dr. King exemplified that.